Svetlana here from Memoryz, and today we have an amazing caregiver from Virginia. I'm also joined with Svetlana and Arvind, and we'll be chatting a little bit more about her experience. And I'll toss it over to her to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Guthrie. Oh, I just said my whole name. That's okay. I'm Jessica. And I am a caregiver of my mother who has Alzheimer's disease. And I've been her caregiver for the past, I would say, 7 years explicitly. In my free time or in my actual daytime job, I work for an education nonprofit. And in the other hours, I take care of her. So I'm excited just to give you some insight into what this journey has been.
For sure. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I guess my first question would be, can you walk us through a little about what the emotional experience was like when you first found out about the diagnosis, and maybe what some of the first signs were and how you, I guess, progressed through that stage in your journey?
Yeah, great question. I think in order for me to answer that, I need to tell you more about my mom. Okay, so I am an only child, daughter of a single mother, and my mom had me at 39. She will tell you I was her 39-year-old surprise, was not trying to have kids at all. She thought she had the flu, but it was really me. I was a 9-month flu. And, my mom very much gave up everything to support me growing up, right? So she owned a hair salon for 17 years. When it was time for me to go to school, she sold the salon, moved to suburbia because good schools in suburbia, right? She became a teacher's aide, that way she would have the same schedule that I did growing up, to be at all of my events, to take me to practices, rehearsals, so on and so forth. And so, my mom, even though she didn't know, she didn't want kids, or wasn't prepared for me, she very much gave up everything to provide for me, right? And so then when it was time for me to go to undergrad, I left home. So I went to New Hampshire, went to Dartmouth, left. And my mom had to figure out who was she without taking care of me. And so fast forward 4 years, graduate, and then I moved to Texas, again, really far away from home. But my mom still very much was trying to figure out how do I still, help Jessica out, all the things. I share that with you because my mom has always been fiercely independent. She's been someone that has made a way out of very little, she's been someone that was always going to work really hard and not depend on other people. She was always the one trying to help others. And so I share that because I started to notice some things. Oh gosh. Yeah, I would say about 7 years ago, 2014-ish, she would forget things, she'd be like, where did I put this? Or, where is this? But it was enough that he was like, okay, you're just kind of forgetful. And then I was like, but something's off. Something is not clicking. And it wasn't until late in the fall of 2014, I took her to the doctor. I was like, something is wrong. Could we get her looked at? I think that there might be some early forms of memory issues. And I didn't really know what to call it at the time. I think it might be Alzheimer's, could be some form of dementia, whatever. And so he did the initial test. And that's when he was like, yeah, she didn't score as well as we would like to see someone for her age, right? And so at this point, I'm 25 years old. I'm just my career is just starting. I am living in Texas at the time, but noticing these things. But my mom is still working. And my mom had so much pride. She would always try to hide it, right? She'd be like, oh, yeah. I knew where that thing was. Or oh, yeah, I'm fine. But deep down, I realized she was probably terrified because something was changing, but she didn't know what it was. Long story short, for me, I think in the moment, I didn't really have any major emotional reactions. It was how do I solve this? What can I do to help her? How do we help hide this thing, right? Because my mom was still working. And it wasn't until, June 2014, I was visiting home, and my mom got in the car to go down to the church for a Saturday church conference. typical drive. She does it all the time, like 10 minutes away. And I get a random phone call saying my mom was in a car accident. A typical, like, it is not a difficult drive, but she was turning and someone basically T-boned her. That is when I knew that, like, we can't play around this any longer. Like, this is actually detrimental to her and anyone else, right? Luckily, everyone walked away just fine. Thank goodness the officer didn't pry very much. But that's when I was like, my mom's life is about to significantly change, and I don't even know what to do. I don't have the finances. I'm not in the place of all the movies white picket fence, come live, bring your parent to come live with you. And I was like, that's not real. Ain't nobody got money to help do this. I was thinking all the realities of what this would mean for me. So that was the summer. My mom kept going to work, and it wasn't until October of that year, her principal called because she worked in a school, and he said, "What's wrong with your mom?" And my mom at this time was still trying to hide it, but it was getting very obvious. And I was afraid to tell him because, I didn't want her to get fired, but I was like, Principal so-and-so, she has early onset Alzheimer's. And he was like, well, your mom has been here for so long. I need for her to go on leave, basically. So my mom went on leave from work for the rest of the year. And luckily, because she worked so hard, she had enough days to basically pay her out for the rest of the year. So again, a financial thing, thank goodness. So all it is to say that I think the emotions didn't hit me until we got through that year, because up until then, it was how do we preserve her dignity? How do we hide this from other people? How do we help her keep going? Because you want for someone to keep working as long as possible, or to keep this facade that they're okay as long as possible, which I found myself now in hindsight, years later, trying to protect my mom and do that with her and for her, when I probably should have said something much earlier. Anywho, that's my first answer.
Wow. And, thank you so much for sharing that. I think we can take a lot away from the resilience that you displayed throughout that, because, to be starting your career and dealing with this at the same time, I can't even imagine going through that. So thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Absolutely.
I guess my next question would be about your experience as a caregiver, specifically as an only child. What does support look like for you, seeing that you are your mom's only daughter? And I guess how has this kind of impacted your relationship with your mom as well?
Yeah. My mom and I were really close before. And I think that is what's driving why I do everything I do now, right? So when you watch someone give everything up for you, you do the same thing. And so at the start of this, especially when my mom stopped working, I noticed that she was losing weight. And I was like, why is she losing weight? And I was like, oh, she's not remembering to eat, right? And so then it was I had to buy her new clothes because she dropped 4 sizes, all the things. And so this journey initially started out with I'm going to prep all her meals, right? So I was prepping every meal, putting things in the freezer, buying clothes, buying activities, literally anything I could buy to make life easier. That's how I started out, right? And then it was let me label all the cabinets. Why? Because I was I want her to still be able to find stuff. And so, you label all the cabinets, label everything around the house. Reorganize the closet, label everything. So that's what it started. The journey started out trying to create as many what do you call them? A little assistance pieces around the house to try to keep her sharp, because I was I have no manual, but the book, the TV says that this is what I should do, right? That's what I was doing. But then that's it. The journey has evolved now to, and that was at the time when I was flying back and forth. So I was prepping meals, doing everything for her. And then I would leave for a week and a half or 2 weeks, fly back, do the same thing. So it was always go, 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 go. That also included her prescription or her medication routine. I've gone through 5 or 6 routines to try to get her to still take her medications, whether I was there or not. Now, though, if we fast forward, even with me being home, the caregiving routine looks a lot like waking up in the morning, helping her change her clothes. We're now in the period of like incontinence issues. So like we're changing Depends now, which no one talks about, like adult diapers, and you're just like, oh my God, this is a big deal. Anyway, so there's that, helping her shower. Okay, cool. Now we're going to move to breakfast, getting her cereal and her banana. We eat the same thing every day for routines. And then like, what are the activities to keep her mind going? Like we have an hour for puzzles, an hour to do this. And then, it kind of repeats throughout the day. And so now to go from creating measures for her to still be semi-independent to now she very much depends on me. We are at the stage where it's almost like I am mothering my mom, and nothing prepares you for your mom to look at you and say, thanks, Mom. And you're like, wait, what? and she genuinely thought she was talking to her mother. But then I'll be like, oh, no. I'm Jessica. I'm your daughter. Oh, that's right. But that's where we are, right? Like we're at the point now of she looks at me for safety. She looks at me for answers. She looks at me to take care of her. And so in terms of the relationship, we're still close, but now it's not like let me call my mom and tell her how great my day was. Now it's like, let me just check in on my mom to make sure she's okay. What does she need? And I will say, like, that's probably been the hardest thing. Like nothing prepares you for that shift. Or like my mom calling me ma'am, like, yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Which is what I did growing up. So that's where we are. I would say we're really close now, but I am truly her everything, her caregiver, her like protector, her provider. And I don't know when that happened, but like we're there. We are there. And that's been tough, but also really, I should say it's tough, and I'm grateful because I have a job that's allowed me to be flexible. I've had a job that allowed me to work like from a distance and still, contribute. And I don't know if I had any other situation or setup, I would be able to be here through this journey and to see all the changes and to be there when that transition happened.
And again, thank you so much for sharing that story. I think that experience is something that a lot of caregivers go through, that kind of a role shift in the relationship and the emotional burden that comes along with that. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think a lot of people are going to take a lot of value from the things you just said. I have one more question before I toss it over to Stadlon and Arvind. And it's about balance, because you mentioned that, you're a fitness instructor and you work for an education nonprofit and you're a full-time caregiver. So there's only 24 hours in the day. So I just wanted, if you could just share a little bit more about how you juggle all of these things and maybe some strategies for caregivers who, want to pursue a career, want to pursue a relationship, want to pursue other things outside of caregiving. Well, how do you juggle all that?
Yeah. I haven't always juggled it well, so I'm not going to pretend like it's been good all these years. And that's why I started like my own Instagram account when caregiving and career collide, because it very much felt like a collision. Like I was like, how am I supposed to show up at work, try to get promoted, try to be seen as like really competent and great, but also be fully engaged with my mom, right? And for a long time, I didn't talk about my role as a caregiver. I would like bend over backwards to make sure I was like at meetings on time, fly back from the East Coast to Texas at 6 a.m. So I would be there. And I was like, why am I literally like killing myself? And it was because of the socialization and the stereotypes of what does it require to be great at your job? What does it require to be seen as competent? And so I was totally living into all of that. And I had to take a step back and be like, no one really cares. No one's really like questioning, if I'm doing my job right. I mean, I worked hard up until now to earn that. But at the same time, I was like, stop prioritizing a job that will replace me in a heartbeat and reprioritize how am I spending my energy. Grateful that my job was like, we're behind you 100%, which made it easier. And so I share that because I think my balance was off because I was prioritizing my career. I was prioritizing trying to move forward. I was prioritizing wanting to be seen a certain way. And in turn, I was also like shutting people out, which actually made it harder for me. So anyway, I share that so that then I came to the realization a few years ago that I needed to prioritize Jessica. And so what that has meant is like saying no to things that I can't do. Like, actually, I can't be in two places at once. No, I'm not available to do that thing. Because actually at 9 a.m., my mom wakes up. And so there's no meetings at 9 a.m., right? So getting clear about my own boundaries. I think the second thing is, how was I using the little moments, or how am I using the little moments while I am home to even just do some mindfulness activities? Like, I can't go get massages all the time, but what I can do is like just pause and take a few deep breaths. When my mom is sleeping, like, am I going to get up and take care of me and do my own stuff before she wakes up? So like, I've learned to balance the schedule to find the little moments for Jessica. And then the third thing I'll say is like, my identity is now, I first will say I'm a caregiver, I'm an educator, and I'm a nonprofit leader. Before, that was not a part of how I introduced myself, right? But I say that first so that people know that I have a life outside of my job and the other things that I do. And that includes another human, which when you open that up, people have a different level of empathy. They have a different level of like understanding when you say no to things. So the lesson there in creating balance is like telling people parts of your story allows folks to see a piece of your humanity and then like understand when you start asking for different things that you need. And then me becoming a fitness instructor, that's because I was like, I cannot pour everything into my mom. I need something for Jessica. What's going to be my creative outlet? I'm not like a dancer, but I said, I'm really good at this and I'm going to learn something for myself. And whatever it might be for you, whether it's, I don't know, knitting or basket weaving, whatever it is, just like something for yourself to feel accomplished about has allowed me to feel like, oh, I am more than just my mother's caregiver. I'm also this thing too. So that's how I try to balance it.
For sure. And, again, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think we've done so many of these caregiver interviews and we always hear that balance is always the hardest part, making time for things outside of your caregiving role. And I think a lot of caregivers watching this are going to take a lot away from that, because you really outlined some really useful strategies for sure. So I guess I'll toss it over to Svetlana and she can ask you a couple questions about your caregiving experience.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing everything thus far. I know right now you're talking a little bit about self-care and kind of what you do for yourself throughout the day. So I was just wondering if you have ever taken advantage of any support tools, or if you would have any advice for other caregivers who are maybe struggling to take that time of self-care, and what would you say to them? And yeah, like how do you specifically make sure that you prioritize your own self-care, and how can others do the same, especially when times are difficult?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's the cliche saying, right? But you can't pour from an empty cup. And that is more real than ever when you're a caregiver, because you pour so much into whomever your loved one is. And so I think there's that. So you can't pour from an empty cup. The second thing is that, I lost my point. Oh, it was right there. I'll get to my third point and come back to that one. There it is. Self-care, I think, is, people have overused the term self-care, that people forget, or like, it is not something that that is out of your control, right? And so like self-care as a caregiver could mean, I am actually reserving this 1 hour at night when my loved one is now in bed to like slow down and read a book that I really want to read, right? Or like watch my trashy TV show. Like, it can be something as simple as that. It can be, I'm going to reserve this hour in the mornings before they wake up to do my own mindfulness activities. It could truly be like, I'm committing to call a friend that I haven't talked to because I've been so overwhelmed. And so I think that's there's this myth that self-care is like this thing that I don't have time to do. the thing is, you have to make the time, even in the busy day, to be like, I'm committing to 15, 30 minutes, 60 minutes of me time. And that could even be while your loved one is sitting next to you. That could be while my mom is in her coloring book, I'm reading a book, right? Because she's busy for 20 minutes. So that's 20 minutes I have for me. That's one way to approach it. I think the other thing I would share is, if you are in a place where you can leverage local like respite care, I pay for a caregiver for the local company to come in. So I have someone come in Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 4 hours. But there's also plenty of volunteer organizations that send people to your homes so you can get out and go grocery shopping. Listen, going to the grocery store for an hour, that is self-care. Why? Because there's no one like asking, pulling, none of that, And so I think it's like shift your orientation to what it means to take care of yourself. And then when you do get the moments to get away, completely unplug. Like, actually, you're not needed. Turn off the phone, like stop trying to be connected, and actually rest and relax so that you can come back refreshed. And that could be you getting away. That could be staying at someone's house, like in their spare bedroom. You could go to a fancy hotel, whatever it is. But like, that's few and far between. But when you do get a chance to get away, completely disconnect and unplug. That would be what I would say for self-care. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are all great answers for sure. I guess to lead into that, my next question would be, overall, from your experience thus far, what would you say has been the most rewarding versus the most challenging experience of being a caregiver?
The most rewarding and the most challenging, or just the versus? What did you say?
Like what has been the most rewarding experience of being a caregiver, and then what has been the most challenging?
Got it. Mm-hmm. The most rewarding parts, and this happened, I force myself to find the moments of joy every day, even the smallest things, because Alzheimer's will take you out. The stress of taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's especially will like take you out of here, because you're always thinking about, this and that. But I refuse to let that be the thing that stresses me out. And so I force myself to find moments of joy. And the thing that is most rewarding about caregiving is like when we're sitting out on the porch and just, chatting and laughing, and I see this spark in my mom's face, or like her laugh, or she'll like do some funny joke. And you're like, oh my gosh, I believe that's a glimpse of who my mom was. And to be honest, right, like she got Alzheimer's at what, 65? So I don't really know who my mom was going to be. Like I think there are moments of just like, oh wow, my mom's so funny, and so those are the most rewarding moments, little things like that. Or like we'll be eating dinner and she'll look at me, she's like, are you okay? You seem a little tired. And you're just like, you read all the emotions in me, right? And that, like, that's a mom thing. Like a mother does that. And so I don't take those moments for granted. I'm grateful that I'm here for that. Like, obviously, that's probably the most rewarding, being here to experience moments like that. Because they don't always happen. Because on the flip side, when you said the most challenging, when she can look me straight in my face and say, where's Jessica? Have you talked to Jessica today? You're like, oh, I'm right here. I'm Jessica. Oh, okay. And like the sense of like, she can be sitting right next to you, but feel so distant, right? There's nothing that gets you used to that. So I was going to say that. And the other challenge, honestly, is like people with Alzheimer's, they get old and like they stop being able to tell you when they have to use the bathroom. And I would talk about it here because this is real and no one prepared me for this. We just went to a basketball game, like arena, stadium, all the things. And we get up and like there's like a wet spot on the floor. My mom basically like used the bathroom in public and didn't tell me she had to go. And like, because society hasn't thought about elder care, right? There was no family restroom for me to help her. Because of the bag regulations, I didn't have like a diaper bag to help change her clothes, change the pens. And so I'm just like, we care so much about people, yet have we created basic systems to make sure people can preserve their dignity in public, right? Like, if it was a kid, people would be like, oh my gosh, da 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 da, you know? And so I think this is like my new like frontier challenge. It's just like, we have got to do better about creating systems and structures for supporting elderly people, especially like in public spaces. It should not be a question whether I'm in a wheelchair or not that I need an elevator because my mom, it's hard to walk through crowds, or like, you know, it should not be a question of a family restroom that like is built for people to like get help up and off the stool, like little things like that. Gosh, no one talks about until it gets to the point where like they're so old. That's not okay. That's so wrong. Anyway, clearly I'm passionate about that right now.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good point. I mean, yeah, it's very good to bring up, and I'm sure other people feel the same way. So it's good that you're vocalizing these things. You mentioned about your mom and you sitting on the porch, and I'm pretty sure that I watched a story on your story when you and your mom were on the porch just getting some errands done, and there was like a bug, and you guys were like laughing. So when you said that, it reminded me of that, and I just wanted to ask you maybe if you could share what are some other activities that you like doing with your mom? I know you mentioned you guys build in some thinking and like mind stuff throughout the day. So I was just wondering maybe if you could expand a bit on that.
Yeah, so it's evolved over the years. However, in my mind, I was like, we must keep her brain busy because to keep all the things firing and connecting, that's important. So we started out with like, the basic word search books or like the crossword puzzles, Sudoku. That got hard real quick. Okay. And then we moved to a little bit more simple word searches with like, they were squares of like 5 by 5. So it's pretty easy to find the words. Then we moved into coloring books. We've always colored, like adults color just to calm themselves down, and I think coloring for her is just such a calming activity. So coloring books, she loves, they're called dot to dots. It's literally just connecting the numbers to create shapes. She can no longer do that now, but it was a great exercise of counting and like understanding whatever the image would be. Let's see. We were doing puzzles a lot, like basic, and I mean basic puzzles for toddlers. Big like block puzzles that you get like little kids to play with are actually difficult for her now, but that's also a really great activity to help her like just spatial reasoning. Let's see what else. Oh, we would do a lot of like crafty activities. So just going to the craft store and basic, what are they called, watercolors, and or like just gluing things and then just hanging them up around the house, like basic arts and crafts she loved. I think the other thing is less about like activity, but what am I doing to keep her active? So like I will not force her, she likes to. I'm doing laundry, help me fold these things. She is still, and she's a good folder of things for the most part. I would say now in the past couple of months, it's just become like blobs of stuff, but she feels like she's being productive, right? I'm taking the dishes out the dishwasher. Mom, put these silverware away. Okay, sure, right? The whole point is to see, like, she wants to and needs to feel successful at something, right? I've never seen her more happy than completing a puzzle, being like, oh my gosh, we did it. And you're just like, girl, it's a basic puzzle, right? But there's something around completing it and the energy, like it's just like a second grader who did something great in school, So whatever it is, giving her a chance to get involved and then celebrating when she completes is like the approach that I take with activities.
Yeah, I love that. And especially with the coloring, like you're never too old to color. People really underestimate that, how relaxing it is. And yeah, that rewarding feeling of just like getting something done, I don't think that ever goes away. It's just such a human basic instinct to feel a reward when you accomplish something as small as it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, those were my questions. Thanks so much for sharing. Maybe I'll pass it over to Aravind now.
Yeah, Jessica, and thank you so much for sharing your reflections. It's just an amazing story, and your insight as starting as a young caregiver is so amazing, because you understand so much more because you've just been involved in it for so long. I guess my kind of question to you, just listening from, and you touched on this a little bit, but what are some tools and resources or support that you wish you had that would make your day-to-day life easier, or your mother's day-to-day life easier?
Yeah, tools that I wish I had. Well, obviously this Memoryz app, wish I had that. But I also, there's something around, I didn't know other young caregivers. And so at the start of this, I thought I was completely alone. Like, no one understands, no one gets it. And so this is less of a tool, but more of like, I just wish I was clicked into a network. And I'd be like, well, have you reached out to this group or this? But I'm just like, they are 40 or 50 years old taking care of, a parent who is in their 80s, or it's like X person taking care of their grandparent. And I was like, I am a child taking care of my mother. Not to knock anyone else's experience, but it's different. And so I just, the many nights that I was just like full of anxiety and like felt so alone. I wish I had a network of like younger caregivers. Who knew? I just had to hop on Instagram. There's a whole bunch of us. So there's that. I also think that like I had to navigate a lot of the how should I say, like financial and like paperwork things, but like kind of trial and error, right? Like it wasn't until but like getting my name on my mom's bank account, power of attorney, healthcare power, like all of that stuff, like I eventually figured out, but I wish my mom had that stuff set up before she got sick. You know what I mean? So like there was no adult manual be like, okay, at this point, make sure your parents have these things in place, and for many reasons, we didn't have that. So there was that. I wish I would have known about. I also just wish that, and I still do. I wish I had this, but like, there are moments and times where I wish I just had someone to like pick up the phone and be like, oh my gosh, this thing just happened. And like, oh my God, yeah, that happened to me last week too, And I say this because like my friends are amazing. I have an excellent network of people, but you don't want to put this emotional burden on someone else if they didn't ask for it. And people only have so much bandwidth. We've been living through a pandemic, and so some of that I wish I had, even to this day, would be my top answers to say. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we're hearing that from a lot of caregivers and caregiver support groups. I think it's just so important to have that kind of community. Do you feel like you feel more connected with other caregivers now than, say, when your caregiving experience started in 2014? And what sort of shifts have you seen over the years?
Yeah, I definitely feel more connected now. And I think it's because I started sharing my story. Like no one knows what you're going through if you don't tell nobody. And so I think there's this piece around when you start to give a little, you actually get a lot back. And I think between social media, but also even just friends in my networks are really like, oh yeah, this, I don't have the exact same experience. However, here are some things that I leaned on. And so there's something around when you start to let others in, I actually got more access to supports in ways that I wish I would have been more open about on the front end. I think the other thing that's evolved is that I feel like, I think just honestly, the evolution of like technology and use of social media has allowed me to be connected to so many folks from across like the world, basically. And that has opened my eyes to the realities of how much just we're failing our elderly people around the world, basically, and there's something that is like a fire building within me because of that a little bit. Like, what can we be doing better? Like, how do we fix this? That's what I would say I would see change the most. It's funny because I think in this journey, especially as an only child, or like when you watch TV and you see like the white picket fence, the family, the elder like moves in with the family, you're just like all the like family members come together to help take care of, ex elder. And I was expecting that. Like I was expecting my mother's siblings to like come to the rescue, and none of that happened. And so I think I'm sharing this. I think I had to get used to the fact that it wasn't family that I was going to depend on. It was going to be friends and network members, resource groups, social media groups to like help me navigate this. And I used to be so angry. I used to be so frustrated. Just like, that's not how it's supposed to be, and carry so much resentment. But now I was like, no, friends can become family. And I feel like I've learned so much and have been so supported by people who are not my blood, but who understand and like see me and my mom for the humanity of who we are and like who we can be, which I really do appreciate.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. As like a former caregiver myself, I can relate with you. Like there's just certain things that caregivers understand between each other that just makes that experience much more easier and easier to get through.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it back to Ramon. That's all the questions that I had.
Thanks.
No, thank you so much again for sharing your story, Jessica. I think caregivers at all stages of their journey are really going to be able to pull from a lot of the messages you shared. Even myself, Setlan and Arvind, we definitely pull a lot from your journey. So I know you mentioned your Caregiving Collide page on Instagram. So I'd love if you could tell us a little bit more about that, so any caregivers who are watching can definitely check you out and some of the resources that you're sharing.
Yes. Okay. So I started my Instagram when Career and Caregiving Collide. It is at Career and Caregiving Collide. Love the alliteration. But right now it's just an Instagram page, and it's a chance for me to it's just a blog where I am sharing the ins and outs, the ups and the downs, and just being really honest, because I feel like that's what I needed 5 years ago. Like someone who looked like me, especially as a woman of color, like as a Black young person. I didn't say this before, but the amount of publications, podcasts, organizations that just portray caregiving and elderly people as white people, that's not what the world looks like. And I really care about diversity, especially in Alzheimer's care. So anywho, that's probably a whole different set of questions. But my Instagram is to create a space for young caregivers of all races, creeds, and backgrounds to see the real in-time experience. I'm not that tech savvy, so you won't see fancy reels and things. You'll truly just see me sharing honest reflections. But my hope is that over time, I've got a lot of ideas in my head for how I want to support other folks, both locally and nationally, in terms of, what does it mean to work closely with a home healthcare agency and advocate for your loved one, right? To thinking about wellness support groups, because I'm really passionate about that. To also thinking about how do I help support young folks navigate careers. We're not there yet. Right now, it's just a blog. So definitely follow me if you'd like to see.
For sure. And, thank you so much for sharing that. I think a lot of young caregivers of color will definitely pull a lot from the resources you're sharing. So please check out at Caregiving Collide. It's going to be linked in the bio below. And thank you so much again for sharing your journey. It was really, really amazing chatting with you today.
Of course. Thank you.
Of course. And I guess that's all for this episode of our Caregiver Connection. So definitely feel free to tune in next week.